Welcome to the College of Law and the Centre for Legal Innovation New Law Careers Seminar 2022. I'm Fiona McClay. I'm the Principal and Legal Tech Consultant for McClay Legal. I'm really pleased to be facilitating this. We've got a great panel. I'll be acting as a facilitator, and we're talking about the role of legal technologist. And joining me today, we've got Matt Farrington, who is a lawyer and a legal technologist from Juno. We're Ali Cook, who is legal technology lead at Joseph, and Nam Trong, digital and innovation at Law Squared. So we're covering the different parts of the profession here today. I want to start by just getting clear on what is a legal technologist and what does a legal technologist do. I might start with you, Nam. What do you think it means?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Look, the role's a very broad term. It means different things to a lot of different people. For me and my role, it's about setting the strategy and guiding the direction by which our firm uses technology. And we do that by delivering on projects that essentially accomplish three things. The first being making our processes more efficient, so our business process efficiency, optimizing the client and the lawyer experience, and improving on the quality of our products and services. So for me, that's what legal technologist means.
Great. And what about you, Ali?
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I think I'm obviously coming from the perspective of a technology vendor, and so it's slightly different in that I'm very much focused on the technology we provide to customers. So Joseph is a legal automation platform, and so a lot of my role is focused on making sure that our customers get as much value as they can out of the platform. But I think some of the similarities for me with what Nam said is, it's ultimately, it's a very generalist role. And so sometimes it's jumping in with a customer and problem solving on one specific thing that they're struggling with. And sometimes it's more broad and strategic and looking at, how can we help all of our customers with their digital legal transformation projects, all the way from planning and strategizing to and change management to building and actually executing on a project with Joseph.
Great, thanks. What about you, Matt?
Oh, thanks, Fiona. I guess my usual answer is I describe a legal technologist as the bridge between the lawyers and the tech guys. And sometimes that might be an external tech vendor. I'm working for a law firm. They want to buy a new bit of kit. I relay the requirements to the tech vendor and translate the questions back to the lawyers. But I do a lot of work with in-house and enterprise teams as well. And so sometimes that's actually acting as a bridge between the legal team and the IT team, even though they all sit under the same roof.
Yeah, that translation piece, it can be just so fundamental to the success of a project, can't it? That if people are operating on different planes or don't even understand what the need is or what the solution might be, you can just have a disaster of a project.
And I mean, bless lawyers, but we use a lot of jargon, and bless technology vendors and IT people, they use a lot of jargon too.
Surely no acronyms.
Surely not.
And so I'm just interested in how you came to be working in these roles. What appealed to you most? We'll go in reverse, Matt. What appealed to you?
So look, my standard spiel in this space is I had terrible career advice. I kind of fell into lawyering by accident. I should have become a tech geek myself. I've always been a bit of a geek, and over time found myself, when I'm acting as a lawyer, I work mostly in IT, and having an understanding of IT is great because you can write it down in the contract what's going to happen and when. But I was also the office geek. If someone was having trouble with Word, couldn't make the document compare work, why are my emails coming in, an hour after everyone else's? I would be the one that was answering it. And over time, I've sort of transitioned more and more away from the IT law to the legal tech side of things. And so I very much come at this from a lawyer moving into tech approach. But I know some of our other panelists have much more interesting stories than me moving the opposite direction.
What about you, Ali? How did you become, what appealed to you in the legal technologist role?
Yeah, I think I got the same bad career advice as Matt. I actually did an undergraduate degree first in chemistry, did not like that. So, I just kind of got fielded into law, as I think people often do when you're not really sure what's next. But I maybe discovered that I wasn't going to be a lawyer a bit earlier than Matt. So in the last 18 months of my law school journey, I ended up working for a financial services and financial technology company. And what I really enjoyed about that was, while financial services can be interesting, I think what was really exciting for me was that technology piece. And I found it really exciting to work in an area of an industry that was new, and still growing and developing, and having that opportunity to contribute to how that industry was being shaped by technology. And so I started exploring legal tech more and more, mostly just through law school, like law apps courses, and doing my legal research in technology focused areas. But I ended up being introduced to Joseph in particular through their designer and builder program, which is just an educational course that they offer a couple times a year. And that's how I was introduced to the team. So when I found out that an opportunity was available, it just kind of sounded perfect. And the varied nature of the role and the opportunity to learn so much so quickly, I think has been a perfect graduate experience for me.
Great. Nam, you've got a different story altogether. You started not in the law at all. How did you come to be working as a legal technologist in a law firm?
Yeah, yes, I guess I'm the only one here that doesn't really have a strict legal background. And I'm actually a strong advocate that it's not completely necessary to be working in legal tech. Because for me, I view legal tech as really just tech. I started off my career in fintech. I worked for ANZ in the institutional digital banking team. And we had an online platform for our largest clients, like the bank's largest clients, right? I went from the guy who helped to design the platform, then rolling it out to about 70,000 users. And then by the time I left, I was the product owner for the mobile app, so the corporate mobile banking application. So I went from design, marketing to technical product ownership, and now I get to do it all for a law firm. So I don't just get to do one, I get to do everything. So I think for me, like legal tech works in that way, right? It follows the tech world pretty closely. And I think that's really good because, it doesn't stop people from joining the industry who were just in technology, and also doesn't stop people from leaving the legal domain and having more broader careers in technology as well.
Thanks, Nam. I'm just interested in just drilling a little bit more into what makes a legal technologist different from some of the other roles that we hear around, like a project manager or operations sort of person. What do you think is slightly different in the legal space? And I'll start with you, Nam, because you were just talking about the different roles that you've played in a tech position.
Yeah, look, I think by this definition of a legal technologist, I call like a specialist generalist, right? So like a project manager, a solutions consultant, etc. They have very specialist roles. Someone is a legal technologist generally has a more broader role and a more generalist role, and is that sort of glue between all of the different players, as you might say. So for me, yeah, it's about being a generalist. And there is a lot of stigma sometimes that gets attached to that word, being a generalist. But I personally don't, think that it's a bad thing at all. And I definitely think that you can have the skill set of bringing people together and doing that well as a specialism in itself.
Yeah. And what about you, Matt? What do you see as being the distinction where we're talking legal technologists rather than other roles that people might have in a law firm or law department?
Yeah,
Legal ops space.
I'd agree with a lot what Nam said about the specialist generalist, and I think it's almost I think I'm on really reasonably safe ground in saying technology's here to stay. I think this internet thing is going to catch on, And so the technology can drive a lot of those other roles. There is legal operations technology. There is legal project management technology. Then there is, let's say, legal tech. And so, maybe the technology to provide legal services to the end user. But I'd go further and say there's possibly even lawyer tech. There is technology and tools for lawyers to do their normal lawyering day to day better. And, look, email, CRM, these are all examples of tools that are never going to face your clients, but will face you. Even the niggle of things like time recording, I can make your time recording easier by picking the right tool. And so I'd say it is the generalist, so it does underlie a lot of those other things. But then equally, personally, I don't get shy about getting involved in those things. Someone may come to me with we need to automate our contracts. And if I look at it and say, putting my lawyer hat on, go, well, you don't actually need to automate these contracts. We can just change the contract such that you lose all the branching. We'll get you a better template and you've just got to fill in a name. That's actually probably a better outcome than necessarily, right, the only solution I've got to look at is technology, so we'll hit it with the technology first. So I guess I would describe it as ancillary or supplementary or complementary to those other roles, as opposed to necessarily being distinct and I'm a legal project manager. I don't touch technology. Oh no, I'm the technologist. I'm not going to touch the project management side of things. You have to work together. Sometimes small team, big team. Sometimes it's the same person doing all of these things. That would be my sort of take on that question.
Yeah. And Ali, I guess in a startup, you're the very nature of it is that everybody has a go at the biggest problem that's on the pot at any particular time.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely been my experience. And again, like I said before, particularly a really good experience for someone just entering legal tech. So you get kind of exposure to all of those different areas. And maybe then from a legal technologist, you jump into a specialization like legal ops or legal project management. But I think the other thing, what Matt said before about that translation piece and really being the glue between all of those different roles, I think is really, hits the mark. I think that there's, as much as there's value in having people specialize in different areas, there's also a lot of value in someone who can be a bit of a jack of all trades and just jump straight in to any sort of project. And also that can see the bigger picture. A lot of what legal technologists are doing right now is change management, customer education. And I think to be able to do that effectively, you need to have kind of a higher level view of what's going on as well. And I think for a startup in particular, there's always going to be value in having someone that can just jump into any challenge. But I think that even as the role grows, there's always going to be sort of space for that generalist specialist role to kind of piece together all of the more specialized areas of legal tech that we're seeing emerge as the industry grows.
Well, I'm interested in your thoughts on what you think lies ahead as the industry does grow and the market for legal tech matures. And what do you think? We're talking about legal technologists who are often, as we say, sort of just leading people down a bit of a path into a fairly sometimes unsophisticated market. Do you think that role will sort of fade away as the market does mature and there are more people around who can do those specialist roles? What do you see happening? And I'll start with you, Nam, in the law firm world.
Look, I think there is still, there's always going to still be a bridge person or someone who can connect the dots, so to speak. In your law firms, you generally have your partner structure, and for new law firms, something a little bit different. But let me just put it this way: a partner of 40 years has really deep experience in law and in the legal practice area, but they will hands down not have as much experience as perhaps like a graduate level developer when it comes to technology, right? So there still needs to be someone who can just join the gaps, because I think it goes the opposite way as well, right? The people who are in technology, they need someone to be able to understand, translate, and communicate the legal domain across. And Matt gave a really good analogy around contract automation, and that legal technologist actually calling that out and challenging. Okay, well, is that actually necessary, right? So being that advisor to the business, I think that role will always, sort of be relevant there.
I think there have been some partners who've been doing something for quite a long time who think they have an understanding, perhaps, or are able to, have some quite ingrained habits. So I see a role always going forward for being able to. It's more than translation. It's understanding what's underlying some of the maybe strange requests that you're getting through from some of the people that you're working with. So sometimes that, I think, legal industry expertise, I think, will remain useful even if there are other people who are working on a project who have a lot of particular tech expertise.
Yeah, and it's like, the partners will have all of the problems, but they might not know what exists in the toolkit, right, in the toolbox to solve those problems. And the developers, they have all of the tools, but they don't know what the problems are, right? They don't know where the hole needs to be drilled. So the legal technologist sort of guides that direction and sits in between.
Yeah. And what do you think, Matt, in the in-house world?
So I'm not. I understand where you're coming from about this degree of specialization. And very much, we're all generalists. We're kind of, to Nam's analogy, we're not just, the tools don't exist. We're inventing a lot of the tools as we go along. And certainly in-house, you get the enterprise view. Look, we've got a document management system. It doesn't matter that it doesn't work for the legal team. We've got one. You have to use it. That's part of the corporate policy. And so the tool I'm reaching for is, well, how do we tweak the features of the existing document management system to make it work for a document-heavy, email-heavy team like legal? And so there's definitely some of that, but I guess in terms of your specialization question, I'd probably flip it around slightly. I don't necessarily think things are going to get more specialized, but I do think there is a maturity framework. And so one of my favorite writers and speakers on innovation generally is a UK guy called Simon Wardley, and he talks about pioneers, settlers, and town planners as the different phases of innovation. And it more depends on almost your mindset. The blue sky thinker, we've got nothing. What's a tool that could work here? And that maybe, these are the people that exist in the legal tech startups thinking about, well, how can we do stuff? Then there are the settlers. So the fast followers, the people that take these tools and figure out how to apply them. And then finally, you end up with the town planner phase of the maturity framework, where it's very much about the tools exist, we know they work, but how do we optimize them for maximum efficiency? How do you, right, we've got this great tool, how do we get people on board and using it? How do we train them up and use it? How do we really nail it so it's its maximum efficiency? And so that's both, I think, the maturity framework of legal technology as a whole. We're very much at those early stages. We're not yet at town planning, but it's also the people working in it. And so if you're not the blue sky thinker, but you are actually really good at taking these existing processes and figuring out where the bottlenecks are and how to optimize and innovate them, there is a role for you there. That's not necessarily specializing in a particular legal tech, but you're specializing in a phase of legal tech. If you are the sort of the person that couldn't imagine anything worse than chasing people up at the end of each month to do their timesheets, I would suggest that town planning phase is not for you. You want to be focusing on the settling or the pioneering phases of that maturity framework. And so, and certainly Simon Wardley's point is that all of these people are brilliant in their own way. You don't look down on the town planners. I've got a lot of admiration for time planners because I know I can't do that phase of that maturity framework. So people that can do it should embrace that and be excellent at it. So that's probably more my distinction about where we go in modernity. I don't think people are ever going to get to the point where you're going to specialize in just CLM. And there will be some, but as a rule, it's a generalist approach, but you may specialize in what phase of the modernity of that maturity framework, a particular client's at or a particular piece of the industry is at.
Sure. What about you, Ali? What do you see happening in the software vendor sort of space as vendors get more sophisticated in the way they're offering products? And
Yeah, I think the way Matt described it was really, really interesting. And we, from my perspective, I think he's right in that we're very much still in that blue sky phase. And so a lot of what we do is still around customer education, like educating lawyers on digital transformation, where and that's one of the wonderful parts of my role. Like, I'm definitely more of a blue sky thinker rather than a town planner. And as the industry matures, I think we will see those sort of town planners, the people that specialize in a product or a particular area of the journey. But I think that the blue sky thinkers, there's always going to be a place for them. And so even when, some of the younger lawyers that are just entering the market now, and in a couple of years, they'll be senior associates, and they're much more comfortable with technology. They're still, like, it's not their job to specialize in technology. It's their job to be legal experts. And I think there's always going to be space for the people that can take their expertise, take their problems, and turn them into something, transform the way that they work using those problems. I think that, I just really like the blue sky sort of thinking. I think it really maps out how I see the role playing out. It's really about problem solving, thinking creatively. And that's why being, I think, a generalist specialist is okay. And it's always going to be valuable, because it's really not, for me, being a legal technologist is not as much about the technology. Obviously, I need to understand how to use Joseph and leverage it to accomplish what I want it to for the customer. But I really think, and maybe this is foreshadowing a little bit what we're going to talk about later on, but I think that that sort of creativity, problem solving, that's the kind of core of a legal technologist. And you kind of need those blue sky thinking skills to be able to do that.
Oh, it's a really useful analogy. Thanks, Matt, for that. It works a lot of ways. I'm just wondering if one day we'll have, when you're putting together your matter team, you put a legal technologist on the team, so that at various stages along the way of a transaction or a big dispute, they can be saying, well, why are we doing it this way? There's this tool that could, because a lot of the time it's that translating a tool into a use case, or, this will save you time. And sometimes it's not only the lawyers you have to convince, it's the clients. Even though we think technology is an easy sell to clients, if your clients are lawyers who might be a little bit technology adverse, I don't want the algorithm to do that work. I'm paying big bucks for you, lawyer, to do it. Explain to me why I should entrust this to a technology-based process. So I'm wondering if it will become part of the business services that are offered by law firms when you're putting together a team.
I think that's right. And in a lot of ways, it potentially flips some of the traditional dynamics in a law firm. And so, for example, I know a few people operating in the vendor due diligence space. So M&A transactions, a data room. And the data room guys have all learned, I don't want to take the partners out for drinks and for coffee, because they're not making the decisions about which data vendor to use. It's the junior baby lawyers who come in and are told, just go pick a data room. I don't care which one. And so actually for a junior lawyer to be tech savvy, look, you don't necessarily need to know this one runs on a NoSQL database, that one runs on MySQL, the other one runs on Oracle DB. Like, that's irrelevant. But knowing what the tools are and how they fit for this particular project, junior lawyers that are tech savvy are just going to become more and more important decision makers for firms and for in-house teams as time goes by, as the technology becomes more prevalent. And exactly what you said, Fiona, that a legal technologist on a deal team or a transaction team knowing this, this is stupid. I don't need to sit in a room that's too hot or too cold turning pages anymore. There are tools to help us with this, and I know of one, and it will cost us this. Oh yeah, go buy it. And so, definitely, I do think that is just absolutely another string to the bow for people entering the profession.
And so just looking at what sort of, let's say if somebody is interested in this role, what sort of skills and capabilities that you think that are essential? And a question just come through, so we might just factor that in, but do you need to be a lawyer to be a legal technologist? And again, I'm starting with you again, Nam, that because you're not a lawyer and you sort of foreshadowed your answer, but can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, look, I think, my answer is no. You don't need to be a lawyer to be legal technology. It does help. It can help, not necessarily it will help. Sometimes it can do quite the opposite. But I think, to work in this space, the most important thing for me is a strong sense of curiosity and empathy, to be able to take the problem, to take the context surrounding that problem, to deeply understand the users that are facing that problem, that are impacted by those problems, and then think through from there. Okay, well, where do we go next, and where can we go next? For me, that's the most important characteristic. Obviously, having a strong level of technical acumen, knowing how to work with technology and being comfortable with technology helps as well. But yeah, everything I learned about technology, and most people on this panel, I dare say, it's mostly been, I guess, through experience and through curiosity, right? None of us here did computer science degrees, but here we are.
And even if you had done a computer science degree, what you learned in your degree, will not be helping you 5 years, 10 years down the track. The basics might, but it is constantly changing. So I agree with you that curiosity is just absolutely essential. What do you think, Ali, about the lawyer or no lawyer question?
Yeah, in particular, the question asks about traditional legal roles. And I think that's a good way of framing it as well. I obviously went to law school. I have somewhat of a legal background, but I have very little traditional legal experience. And so I would say, no, you definitely don't need to have traditional legal experience. I think in some ways it's going to help you empathize a little bit with your clients and your customers, and working a lot with lawyers who have a particular way of thinking and working, like it can help for sure. And I've certainly benefited from understanding some of the notation around the law and the legal jargon, which can be a little bit hard to break into. But I think, so yeah, it gives you a head start, but at the end of the day, it's not important. It's like, I didn't know how to code. And I jumped into a technical role and learned about what an API was, what a webhook was, all on the go. So what I would say is, if you think that a legal technologist role is something that you're interested in, but you don't really have a legal background, I think you just need to be ready to, I guess, for the shock of the legal jargon, and be comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that's more broadly a requirement of the role generally, really learning on the go and just being curious, thinking creatively about problems, and honestly having a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. Apologies to use a bit of a buzzword, but it's really available, I think, to anyone with those skills to jump in and help shape the role of legal technologists in the future.
And Matt, what's your view?
Oh, look, I just endorse what the others have said. Look, there are very, very few people that are expert high-level operating lawyers and expert high-level operating technology experts, and those that are probably have something like a job title of founder legal tech startup. So you either come to it as a lawyer who's asking stupid questions about technology, or a technologist who's asking stupid questions about legal stuff. You really do need to upskill yourself and be the one that's asking the questions. I mean, certainly I've found if I'm asking questions in a room, I'm probably not the only one thinking it. And certainly, lawyers are seldom shy about showing off exactly how much they know to someone that's willing to ask them questions. And so exactly what Nam and Ali said, it's really that, it's more that ability to ask questions and think about, well, what does that mean? How does that apply in practice? And so back to one of Nam's earlier comments about that interface between the lawyer who knows what the problem is, the technologist who knows what the solution is, and how do you interface those two together? If you imagine yourself as one or the other, and how do I build that in? How do I build that interface? How do I translate what's going on? And the only way to do it is to ask questions until you know enough to figure it out. So to answer the narrow question, do you need to be a lawyer? No. I do think it helps, because that's a whole lot of questions you don't need to ask anymore. But if you don't, that's not a problem. It's just you'll have to ask the questions.
I know I've found, as a legal technologist, being somebody who's done litigation for 20 years, certainly buys you some, I don't know whether it's credibility or some shortcuts when you're trying to persuade very busy people that they should listen to you, because you can put things to them in a way that they're likely to understand quickly and give you a bit more time. So I think it can perhaps make that front door a bit easier to open, but I totally agree that it's not essential. And as long as you do have that curiosity and you're asking those right questions of people, then you will get to that same place. I think the other skill that I see is really important is that mind around there must be a better way, because all of the stuff we're talking about, there is a manual process and it works. But unless you're the sort of person that's prepared to just say, hang on, there's something wrong with this picture, we need to look at and be able to come up with that problem identifying part, then life can continue on quite well, and no one may even notice that there was a potential solution.
Yep. Sorry, can I just jump in there? Because I've seen a couple of questions around this. I just wanted to call out that legal technology is it's more than just buying the latest legal tech platform, or going in on the latest legal tech startup. Being a legal technologist can be just as simple as creating email automation rules, or mail forwarding rules, and using mail templates instead of manually typing in emails. So it's about, like you said, thinking about how to do things better, rather than just these are all of the latest and coolest platforms. This one uses all these cool buzzwords like machine learning, AI, blah blah. It's just about doing what you do and using technology to do it better, right?
I'd wholeheartedly endorse that. I mean, my standard quip is that a lawyer from 200 years ago would need to move from pen and paper to typewriter to word processor to email. But other than that, that's fundamentally the practice of lawyering hasn't really changed for 200 years. Someone asks you a question, you think about it for a bit, you write something down, you give it back to them, you issue a bill. So I probably would for students in the audience, don't underestimate just the state of the legal profession. And so I would love to spend my days talking to lawyers about AI and innovative automated workflows. My most popular services are optimizing Outlook for lawyers and word mastery for lawyers. Teaching people how to, do track changes a bit faster is sometimes the level you're operating at. A rising tide will lift all ships. And so we are looking, as a group, legal technologists are trying to lift the base of the profession, but there is definitely some archaic practices still out there. And you kind of liken it to other professions where, engineers use CAD, software developers use integrated development environments, Accountants use accounting packages, or at least Excel. What lawyers have email. Like, that is our peak technology right now. And so there is a lot of work to do in that space. There is plenty of work to be going around. The people that are graduating tomorrow have a good 20 years before that tide is risen up enough that we can probably stop talking about email anymore.
Yeah, there was a survey of Australian and New Zealand law firms in the end of last year, and asking them what was the best piece of tech they'd invested in, and the winner was Zoom. You know, we're not talking about anything too fancy here, and I think it was something like 18% of them were on the cloud. So as a whole, the profession is there's a lot of change we need to work through before we're going to need your town planning expertise to come in and start tidying up the tech. We need lots of enthusiasm to keep the momentum going. I can see there's some questions. I just want to ask one more question before we start tackling those. And I just wanted to find out what you recommend people do if they are interested in moving into a legal technologist role, if you've got some specific recommendations of what would be a good thing to do. I'll start with you, Ali.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's funny because there's simultaneously a lot out there, and also it's a very new industry. So there's a lot of moving parts and it can be a little bit overwhelming. One of the things I did is just honestly start by following every interesting company and vendor and thought leader in this space on LinkedIn, and just absorbing as much as I could and looking for just looking for opportunities and reaching out to people to chat. Of course, I did the Joseph Designer and Builder program, and that was kind of my particular entryway. And so that's something that's available for free. So if you want to upskill, that comes up a couple times a year as an opportunity. So I would highly recommend that, just based on personal experience. But one of the other things that I did in law school was get involved in a law apps course in a lot of law schools. And this is particularly speaking to law students, I suppose, but a lot of universities are coming out with different types of legal innovation courses, and I would highly recommend getting involved in those. One of probably the most useful and most important skills that I learned from my law apps course was design thinking and user experience design, and that sort of ability. And I don't know if we've touched on it so specifically, but it's certainly, everyone's kind of talked about it a little bit in passing, that ability to empathize with the person you're solving a problem for, and just ask the question, like, how could I make this better for them, and really understand the root of their problem, I think is the number one skill. And so finding different courses and materials that can upskill you and sort of flex those creative thinking muscles in that way has definitely been the most valuable for me.
Yeah, it's not just about tech, is it? Even if you are a legal technologist.
Exactly. It's actually, this is a bit of a conflict because I do work for a tech vendor, but it's not that much about technology. It's really about change and curiosity.
Yeah. Well, good tech on its own won't have the solution solving that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. What do you think, Nam? What would you recommend people do?
Look, I can't endorse design thinking enough. Just so at Law Squared, we have 4 stages of our project delivery framework. So design is the first stage of that framework. But any course you can do, I think there's a lot of UX academies and UI academies, but any course you can do on design thinking would be helpful. Agile project delivery would also be helpful as well. Not so much to, understand the entire, you don't need to be an Agile certified expert going into legal tech, but, if you can understand what a user story is and what it's used for, that would definitely be very helpful. One exercise that we recently did with our latest group of latest intake of interns at Law Squared was to pick any platform. We use the platform called Miro. It's an online whiteboarding platform. So pick any platform like that, and then just go in, learn it, and then teach it to someone. Teach it to your parents, or someone that you work with, and teach them how to use it. What are the core functionalities? What are some nifty tips and tricks? And when would you use that platform? So I think that would be a good exercise. And if you could bring up that kind of anecdote, in an interview, I would definitely be very impressed.
That's such a great example of because you think you know how to use stuff until you try to show someone else, and that really does expose. Yeah, I think I like that. That's really clever. What do you think, Matt?
Oh yeah, look, I'd absolutely endorse both of what Nam and Ellie have said. I mean, me personally, and I was a law student, so I'll speak to law students now. If you've already got a tech background, just disregard anything I'm about to say. One of the things I really admire about the tech industry is this idea about micro certifications. So a short course, a little badge, or a certificate that you get at the end of it to show that you know something about that particular thing. And this is a lot to Nam's point about picking a platform and figuring out how it works. And what I'd suggest for those that are looking to get into the space, the enterprise architecture or the software architecture track is a fantastic one to follow. And so both all of the big cloud platforms, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, all have this type of entry-level cloud certified practitioner badge. And it's not necessarily about you can sit down and write code, but you at least know the components of that web platform that are available. If you need to deploy secure authentication, you do it this way. If you need a database, you do it that way. If you need a user interface, you do it that way. And some of what it's not necessarily teaching you how to hand paint the individual bits of a puzzle, but you can put the puzzle together and look at the overall picture. And that again is the type of the type of qualification that's really invaluable if you are getting involved in legal tech. Hey, look, lawyers are sensitive about their documents, legal professional privilege, client confidentiality. I understand that this type of encryption sounds good, but it's not actually protecting my client data. Whereas that type of encryption is the sort of thing I'm looking at. And what that means and how I interact and so not necessarily understanding how to write the code to encrypt the documents, but at least knowing if I use this service, I'll get the outcome I want. If I use that service, I won't. So I'd really recommend that. Personally, the AWS Cloud Certified Practitioner course I've done, it's it's a few hours of your time. If you want to sit the exam, it's like $100. So it's not a big deal, but it really would teach you a lot. And I'd even say if someone is interested in going into IT law, that's also a fantastic course. If you want to be a lawyer in the technology space, again, understanding some of those comments, those ideas, what it means, it'll give you so many more insights about how you advise on a particular transaction or draft a particular document. So I'd really recommend that as well. And I think, at the risk of stealing your job, Fiona, to summarize, it's really get out there, get your hands dirty, metaphorically, with the technology, figure out what it can do, and think about what it means.
No, that's exactly right. The other thing I was going to say is it's the people that you're talking to and the networks that Ali, you mentioned just following people who are doing interesting things on social media, but I know I did a course at the Centre of Legal Innovation, and it just opened my mind to all what other people were doing. And then, so having those sort of, and there are heaps of those courses that are available wherever you live in the world. Then from that, building out your network out of the other people who are doing those courses is useful. But also, I think it's in legal technologists, not only talking to the people who are using better tech than you are, but talking to people who aren't using tech is also important so that we keep it aligned with where we need to pitch what the message that we're telling people. It's like, and it goes back to, like you were saying, about teaching people how to use Word. If you're talking to them about AI and they're still struggling to, work out track changes, you're not going to get them and be able to bring them along if this sort of change journey that we're trying to do. So I think it's important to keep arms in both places, and keep your communication channels open. And a couple of people have asked a question about if there are any particular areas that are open, if they're in a place in the world that isn't as advanced in adoption of legal tech. So I would suggest that the Centre for Legal Innovations material is useful. Has anybody else got any other specific comments they want to touch in on that sort of global resources?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is that the advice I gave before, it's not just relevant to people looking to get into legal tech. If you wanted to get into technical product management or entry-level design roles, I'd be giving the same advice. So regardless of whether you're in the legal profession or legal industry, and if the legal industry where you are is perhaps a little less developed, where there isn't that necessarily that strong demand for technology, it's still an option to perhaps pursue a career in technology in a domain area that is a bit more advanced, and then pivot to legal later on when the maturity catches up.
That's awesome advice, yeah.
Sorry, the other thing that I was going to suggest is, sorry to interrupt, Fiona, was to get involved in industry organizations. I think, there's some really wonderful ones in Australia, but I think there's also some international ones. The International Legal Association for Technology and the I forget the exact acronym, but there's an international organization. So it connects legal innovation experts and legal tech experts globally. There's different, even the CLI, again, is a great organization. And I also think if there isn't an organization, a good way to kind of get connected to other people is to start one yourself. I know that's a big ask, but if you look around you and you're not seeing what you want, create it yourself. And I think that's a really good conversation starter for people all over the world in the profession.
And I think one thing the pandemic did induce is people got much more used to jumping online and talking to strangers because you couldn't go out and have cups of coffee with people. So yeah, definitely that's a great idea. ALTA is another really good Australian industry organisation, and they have regular hour of power where you can see 6 demos in an hour rather than having to sit through an hour each one. That's something I found useful. All right. So we've got a question here about are there any advice for newbies who are applying for roles where everyone is requiring prior experience? And I think we sort of talked a little bit about some of the examples of skills that you could display in complementary areas. And I think, Nam, you covered that off by looking for other roles. Anybody want to add anything to that? I think that it's a perennial problem.
Yeah, I think that it's a good question. It's really hard, but I think that, if you look at the position description and it says, we're looking for prior experience in design thinking, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, I've never done a design thinking course. I don't have design thinking skills. But I would suggest just looking back at the experiences you do have, and don't underestimate how valuable unique experiences can be. And rather than saying, oh, I've got this experience that directly lines up with what's being asked for, look for unique or new ways that you can demonstrate that experience, that skill. So for example, design thinking, you maybe in your last job, you took the initiative to redesign a process. And that in and of itself is design thinking. You empathized with, you found a problem, you stepped through how to solve it, and you improved a process within your organization. I think don't underestimate those sorts of analogous experiences. And that's something that, at least when we're hiring at Joseph, we look for, that people taking that sort of initiative rather than having directly transferable experience. It's more about the skills and the sort of soft skills that you can show.
No, I think that's great advice. There was one question that was about what it's like at the bar, which I just thought we might touch on because we haven't been there. And I think, you know, and I spent a lot of time trying to drag technology into litigation. We've all had to go online in the last 2 years. And so I think that there has been a move to introduce barristers to technology that they had resisted quite successfully for quite some time. And in Australia, we're still seeing judges coming out and talking about how all these solicitors need to get back into the office, and all of this trying to do court online is not going to last, which I hope is wishful thinking on their part. But I think that there is a lot of tech that you can use in litigation to make it run smoother. And I think there's been a perception in the market that it has to be at the big end of town, but I think you need to check that out, because I think you'll find that it's no longer the case, and the cost of hosting data and doing searches has just been slashed. So I actually think that barristers can get into some of this in terms of doing their case preparation using digital tools. And so I think you do need to look at that. The other thing you can use technology for, even just rehearsing your advocacy, recording yourself speaking and all that sort of stuff, is way easier now. You can practice your presentation, get feedback, particularly if you are now going to be working on digital. There are lots of tools to help you improve your advocacy in a way that practicing used to be much harder, because you had to get a room and get somebody to watch you and give feedback. One thing that's interesting, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, is using, and perhaps more in arbitration, where that you can control the rules a bit more, but can you use AI to measure credibility and detect whether somebody's lying in an arbitration, rather than have a human being make that assessment? And what would be the differences there? I mean, that's pretty far out. I'm not sure we're up to there. Facial recognition technology is all very cutting edge. But if we are looking at trying to cut down the cost of resolving disputes, is there some ways that tech could help there? Anyway, that's dreamland, but this is the sort of thinking that legal technologists get to do.
Yeah, and to that, Fiona, what I'd probably say is what technology, if the question is what technology is available to barristers, if you're not sure about that, you need a legal technologist, because I guarantee you very, very few, and this call accepted perhaps, very few tech vendors have any idea about what the difference between someone at the bar, or what the difference between a barrister and a solicitor is. Most law students and quite a few lawyers don't understand what the difference between barristers and solicitors are necessarily. Certainly in New Zealand, we have a fused profession. You're both a barrister and a solicitor, so no one cares. Yeah. And what I'd say is it was actually barristers that were first on the legal tech bandwagon, because they got fed up going down to the library and looking stuff up in books and on microfilms, and hove into view the behemoths of Lexis and Westlaw. And if you don't know how to use those tools right, that should be the first thing you do. But they have some really great legal technology tools for barristers. And you look at things like, and this is where I tend to distinguish between what I would call legal tech and lawyer tech. Is it a tool to produce a legal outcome? Is it a legal service for clients, or is it a tool for lawyers? And so if I'm writing an opinion, I could manually go and check every citation in my Word document to check it's right, or I could use a tool like KeyCite to actually flag me to, oh, did you know this court in this weird jurisdiction I've never heard of actually disagreed with that citation yesterday? That's a fantastic legal tech tool. And so, but I don't, sometimes barristers think, oh, no, there's no legal tech for us. You were first. And so there's definitely some stuff around there. And then you look at stuff like even the very rules-based things, like preparing pleadings in accordance with the rules of the particular court you're dealing with. There are tools to help you with that as well. And so what I'd say is there definitely are tools out there, but you possibly need someone to help you along with that translation about when I ask for a deadline management tool, well, what does that mean for the lawyer? I'm looking for as I say, an online mediation platform. Well, what does that mean? And so lawyers ask for one thing, providers offer it a different way. You need that translator in between.
Yeah, Absolutely.
Yep. I think for me, it's about not restricting yourself to a set definition of what legal technology is. One example I'm thinking of is when it was like in-person court proceedings, you'd have your barrister, you have your solicitors pretty much sitting at the same table. They can hand out corrections, hand out file notes. And now that we've gone virtual, one of the lawyers in my firm recently described to me that you're playing through that same scenario, but now you're using WhatsApp to try and send them a message. And now the barristers aren't checking their phones, right, while they're advocating for the client. So, it's something simple like throwing an Apple Watch into the mix so that they're notified of the solicitor trying to contact them or flag them down. Like for me, that's a really important use of technology, and that's how the legal technologist adds value to those conversations, right?
I have an extremely broad definition of what technology is, and it, at one level, it's any tool that makes legal delivery of legal services better. And yeah, that can be a watch, that can be paper. It doesn't always have to be tech, but as long as we're using a tool that'll is available, the right price, and that people will use. I think that's a win. It's all about that improvement piece. So being flexible about that. And that might apply to some of the people who are interested in what they can do in an environment where legal tech isn't as advanced. Go back to, okay, well, what templates can I use? What free tools have I got available? What can I do with Excel? What can I do with basic tools? There was one quick question I wanted to just look at. Somebody was asking about being a paralegal and trying to, how can you sell up? And that can be hard when you are somebody who's in a hierarchical organisation to get the attention of people who just want things done the way they used to. Have you got any advice? And I know we're coming up against time. But Ali, I'll start with you. You do this all day.
Yeah. And this kind of, what I'll say, and this kind of connects back to what we were just talking about, but the point of legal technology, and I think one of the reasons that you can maybe get a bit of pushback is lawyers feel like it's replacing them or replacing legal work, or technology is going to do a subpar job of what a lawyer does. And that's not the point at all. The point of legal technology is not to replace lawyers. It's to make legal work easier and more efficient and more enjoyable, and give clients a better experience. And it allows lawyers to focus on the higher level things that actually add value. So where there are those really complex legal problems that a piece of AI is never going to be able to answer as well as a lawyer can. And so my recommendation with that in mind is to find ways to just use technology to make a lawyer's job easier. And that can be as simple as just using Excel or creating something very small and start by making small changes. And, often we look at the role of a junior as someone whose job it is to make their superiors' lives easier, to make their work easier. And technology is the best way to do that. And as a junior in a law firm, you're often the only one that really understands that piece of technology. So use that skill to your advantage and really demonstrate how they can do things better and easier. I think as a junior, you're actually in a really unique position to do that. Not just because you understand the technology, but because you see the ins and outs of what's going on and have a slightly different perspective. So yeah, don't underestimate the value that you can add just by making those small changes.
I think also maybe be prepared that it may not be as simple as saying, oh, there's a tool that can do this. You may need to go a little bit further in explaining why this is a better solution. It just depends on how receptive you are. Maybe we should try and get a job at Law Squared where they have a whole team in charge of digital innovation and are receptive, because you may be working in a place where you are just banging your head against a brick wall and some people are just not interested, and you may just have to make a decision about whether that's the right place for you. But you can still learn environment, and it'll certainly polish up your persuasive skills in trying to interest people in doing things differently. Look, we're right up on time, so I just wanted to thank everybody, the faculty, for attending this session. It's just been really useful. I hope all the audience has enjoyed it. So a recording of this session will be available shortly as both a video and as a podcast. And if you'd like to get updates about the release date of the recordings and the other work of the Centre for Legal Innovation, you can follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone.